Alright, hello again to anyone watching these Kaijudo videos. Today I am here with the nature portion of the Kaijudo Eye of the Storm set review. So I'll be going over the 13 cards from nature that are commons, uncommon, and rare. Of course, the super rare I'll touch on. Actually, there is no nature super rare in this set, but I'll touch on more about the super rares and the multi-civs and future installments of this series. But today, of course, will be nature, and starting off, we have Air Warden Prickleback, which is a Beastkin Megabug, so very interesting typing. Level 5, 6000 power, Protector Skirmisher. While battling a Void Spawn, it gets plus 5k, and whenever it wins a battle, you can put a card from your mana zone into your hand or on top of your deck, so kind of a weird effect. Yeah, this card, I mean, one of the first comparisons you might make with the Protector Skirmisher stat line, 6000 power as well, is Ardu Cloudstrider. This card has the benefit of being a big 5000 power bonus, and it has this effect which can sort of draw you a card from your mana zone, but not really card advantage there because you're moving a resource from one place to another, and it has to be in a scenario where you want to take the hit on your mana development in order to get that extra card. The top of your deck part is really weird. I'm not really sure what you would want to use that with, but maybe setting up certain plays with, I don't know, like you can win a battle to like set the top card of your deck with the card from your mana zone if you're playing like a Boar deck, which is one of the ways you can abuse the top of your deck. Like that could be a cool play. Like you tap, if of course, like a lot of these Boar combos revolve around your opponent having a tap board, but if you're able to tap your opponent's creatures down somehow and then attack over one of them with the Air Warden, put something on top of your deck, like you can put an Agorix from your mana zone to the top of your deck, and then you can trade in like some small creature you have lying around into that another one of their creatures. Then you can summon the Agorix and do some cool stuff, or maybe summon a Squillis off the top of your deck. Like that could be a home for this card, but outside of like trying to exploit the abilities here and using that as a key thing, it's just a little bit too underwhelming of a card. Ardu Cloudstrider isn't a card I'm a particular fan of, and a lot of the strength of that card would come from it being an earlier drop. Not too concerned about like the difference between being able to Blown Blaze or not. I think just having the Ardu Cloudstrider come down a full turn earlier to really get the impact of it as like a deterrent, as a card that holds off your opponent's attackers. I feel like it's really important that that card comes down soon. Having a 5-drop that comes down and doesn't actually block is, I think, a pretty big downside for a card that's not going to be attacking your opponent and being used proactively too well. So not really a huge fan of this card. Not sure how relevant the Void Spawn ability even will be. Like a lot of the cards that are Void Spawns that might see play in the competitive sphere would be, a lot of them would just be small early drops. Things like Savage Spawn, maybe Blade Spawn that I talked about in the fire video. Like there might be some incidental Void Spawns that say play here and there, but a lot of them are going to be just small creatures that this card attacks over anyways. Maybe the most relevant expensive card that would potentially see play would be Vang, I guess, which is a super rare from this set. But I don't think that's really a point of consideration that would really want you to put this card in your deck. Like it's not really here to be a hate card for Void Spawn. You would be looking for something akin to Ardu Cloudstrider and maybe looking to abuse the mana effect. Like I said, it might be kind of okay, but it's probably not worth it. Like if you're building your Boran deck, I don't think you'd even want to include this. You'd probably just play more powerful generic cards, and then you would want to, like, you don't need to stack the top of your deck with like a really powerful card like Squillis or Agorix or whatever, or maybe a second Boran or something like that. Like I'd rather just play better cards in my deck and just hit anything off the top of my deck with Boran, because in that spot, like if I'm already set up, I'm already making plays against my opponent's field, I already have Boran going, like I don't necessarily need to guarantee I hit some giant bomb. Like maybe that's incorrect, but it's probably not worth me playing a card like Air Warden Prickleback to do that at the very least. So not really a fan of this card overall. Next up we have Briar Pit, which is put target enemy creature, power 3000 or less, and then if it's your turn, 6000 or less from the battle zone into your opponent's mana zone. So at 5 mana compared to the darkness version, pretty appealing, or more appealing at least. But obviously the downside here is you can't, it will go into your opponent's mana zone, which is of course a downside. But this card might be a little bit more effective against things like evolution creatures like Blinder Beetle Prime or something, if you wanted to play this card as an early removal option compared to things like Terra Pit and Root Trap. Like 5 mana is a pretty big difference over 6 for that purpose. But this card, I don't think this card is really seeing play on the overall. Like too weak of a Shield Blast. Nature decks especially, like they barely play Root Trap to begin with, so I don't really know if this is going to find a home. So yeah, not too interested in this card overall. Next up, we have Chief Headstrong Wanderer. This might be one of the better ones of this cycle, just because like there's a lot of cards that enter the battlefield and draw. There's a lot of cards that enter the battlefield and discard that are more efficient and effective than those. But the creatures that enter the battlefield and ramp, like Bronze Arm Tribe, is super anemic. Like it's kind of like Hydra Spire, where it's just like too small for the stat line. It just doesn't really do much, but it's a bait for Nature Evolution, so it has some redeeming stuff going for it. Headstrong Wanderer, 5 mana 5k is really powerful. There's also like the 5 mana 2000 power Deepwood Druid, I think. This card is just like a clear upgrade over. That card didn't really see play, but I don't know. As like a bait creature, not super exciting because like you're ramping into an evolution, but like you don't really care how much power your creature has if it's going to be a bait for something, so you'd rather just play like Bronze Arm Tribe style effects. But if you're just playing a mid-range creature, like 5 mana 5k that draws a card in your mana zone is pretty solid. I just don't know if this card really sees play. Like Gigahorn Charger and Broodmother are probably just way more effective cards overall. And I don't think like the mid-range deck really exists that wants this card over those. Yeah, I just don't really see it, unfortunately. Like I'd rather just have if I want bait for my Anjac, I'd rather it just be like those Gigahorn Chargers and stuff that are way more impactful coming out of my mana zone, or Broodmothers, that kind of stuff. But I think this card is one of the more playable ones. Like it's just a strong card. 5 mana 5. Again, 5 mana 5k is a solid body with this +1 effect. Pretty good. Especially when there aren't a ton of like amazing creature-based ramp options like this. So next up we have Essence Boar. So Trapper, which is a new ability, 3 mana 2000. When it wins a battle, or when a creature wins a battle, put that creature in your opponent's mana zone. So it's a Slayer that hits into their mana zone, which can be kind of cool. So can take out certain creatures. Obviously, again, ramping them, especially in the early turns, if you're trading this into like an evolution creature, is a lot worse, where you're just giving them all that extra mana. It could be a cool addition, maybe. I just don't think it really gets there in any decks. Yeah, like I don't see it. Like Mono Nature could use this tool because they don't have a lot of like removal options, and this is like a kind of defensive card that can answer evolutions, but you'd rather just play a proactive game and maybe answer their evolutions with yours if you need to, because your evolutions are pretty huge compared to the evolutions coming out of other civilizations. Like Anjax just beats over whatever they play a lot of the time, or like trades off with their evolutions at the very least. So I don't think you're really looking for this card. 3-drop slot is also hyper competitive, especially in Nature where they have so many good options. Don't really think this card gets there. Like if you're playing any kind of multi-civ defensive deck that would want this, like chances are you could probably play like a different Slayer if you want that effect. So not really a super big fan of this card. Flutterbug, similar to Bladespawn from the Fire review as well. When it enters the battle zone, you can choose one of your creatures. It can't be blocked. If that creature has less power than it, or by creatures that have less power than it. So the key thing here, it's a 2-drop Mega Bug. So like I said with Blades, or like I was touching on with Bladespawn, this is just going to be like an upgrade to cards that already exist and probably already see play. Like Ambush Scorpion is a card that can still see play in Mega Bug decks, and Flutterbug like can just slot in easily over that strict upgrade. I think it's probably still worse than Manapod Beetle. I'm not 100% on that. This card can be a nice effect because off of Hive Queen, like you can basically answer a block. It gives you another creature that can answer a blocker effectively. Like if you're trying to go for game and you need to swing through an Aqua Strider, you have like Homunculon that could out that Strider. You have Rusalka that could out that Strider, and now you have Flutterbug as well, which is a nice effect to get out of your 2-drop for the late game. Also just like pushing through stuff, like just making your Sword Art unblockable, to just have that kind of pseudo fast attack effect in the face of a blocker can be pretty nice for the late game out of a 2-drop slot. So I think it's a pretty good card, but Manapod Beetle is super powerful in the early game, really hard to interact with when you're coming from a control deck wanting to clear out bait creatures. Like, it can be a pretty big liability to try to pick off Manapod Beetles and let your opponent advance their mana zone, so would require some testing to figure that out, but plenty of builds of Megabugs will play multiples of both of them. Like, I've seen many builds play 3 Ambush and 3 Manapod Beetle and just go hard on the Megabug 2-drops, and I could definitely see like Flutterbug is just a strict upgrade there, so a pretty good card. I think it's maybe a bit, I don't know if it's a bigger upgrade or a smaller upgrade compared to how Blade Spawn it would be compared to like something like Bronca. But I think the difference there is like Blade Spawn is a much easier change to make, because again, like Flutterbug isn't necessarily going into the decks playing like 9 fire 2-drops where you can easily switch one of those playsets out. Like, it's not all the time that you're just jamming your deck full of Megabug 2s. So like, you have to make a tougher call between like this set versus Manapod Beetle. So not as much of a slam dunk in terms of like this card is going to see play guaranteed in like every Megabug deck going forward, but definitely a strong option and a nice one to consider. Could even be like a consideration for Mono Nature out of the 2-drop slot. I haven't found like the perfect 2-drop yet for Mono Nature. I think like I've liked Savage Spawn as like an attacker. I've liked Pouncing Cricket as a Shield Blast blocker, which is I guess another Megabug option that this card is competing with. Like, if you're not playing Ambush Scorpion, to be honest, you should probably be playing Pouncing Cricket. I just think like the Shield Blast is probably better, to be honest, than the extra 2,000 power in a lot of matchups. Like, even against Rush, where you might want that extra 1,000 power to contest like Blaze Belchers, you'd also like to have these extra Shield Blasts that you can just blast out a creature and race them with, which you're going to have to do a lot of those times. So, to be honest, comparing this card as like a strict upgrade to Ambush Scorpion might even be incorrect as well, because it's competing with Pouncing Cricket again in the Megabug decks. So, yeah, not as much of a slam dunk improvement. But yeah, for Mono Nature, like maybe you can get it off Roll Core, similar to how you can get it off of Hive Queen in Bugs. But maybe it might be even better there than in nature than it is in Lightwater Nature, just because like Lightwater Nature has a lot of ways to remove blockers. Mono Nature, you kind of just have to attack into their blockers and force your way through them. So it could be a nice addition, because it gives you like a mid-game way to push your Anjac through a Strider or a Lemon, so they don't get like the chump block and ramp out of it. Like, I feel like it could be a nice tool for those decks, just to get a little more late game effect out of your 2-drop. So I could see trying this card out over Cricket, just because where Cricket might even be better in Lightwater Nature Megabugs, I think Flutterbug would fill like a bigger hole. Like, there's a bigger hole where this effect could fill for Mono Nature specifically. So I think that could be worth exploring in Mono Nature midrange. Because yeah, the effect is a lot more novel in that archetype. So Guacamole Gunner, this card is just, I think, one of the better cards in this set. Just great Shield Blast, similar to Joko. Just a creature that has the functionality, like, it could be an 8 mana 2k body if you just want to sit it in play, and then it can unleash, or you can sacrifice it off, not unleash. You can sacrifice it off to banish or put a target enemy uncrapped creature from their battle zone into your opponent's mana zone. So very nice card here, and one of the benefits is it's a wild veggie, which can go a long way to supporting the bad apple packages that can go into decks. Just not only is it great to have this like defensive Shield Blast that you get to just play in your deck, but having it be this card that like you can just drop an extra wild veggie body into play that can then just ramp you. Like, I feel like a fair amount of the time you're not even going to banish it off to kill their creature. You're just going to leave it in play so you can drop a bad apple and then just start ramping a ton with the extra bodies you present. So I think just Shield Blast wild veggie that doubles as a great defensive Shield Blast, I think, is like a great addition. Doubles up on like the Sumo Artichoke style effect. So I really like this card. Next up, we have Mana Lightning. So whenever one of your creatures attacks, you can put the top card of your deck into your mana zone. So I talked about how much I didn't like Mind Matrix in the water video, which is this effect except you draw. But the difference there is like Mind Matrix is directly competing with like Logo Scan at the same mana cost. This card is competing with something like if you're comparing this to like the other 3-drops, those 3-drops are like Cultivate or Energize. Now those like Energize has Shield Blast, which is part of why it's so good as a card, but like Cultivate being like 3 mana, it's really easy to get the 1 attack off of this to just get the 1 ramp, which is a lot better than playing Mind Matrix to draw 1 card. And then if you're trying to draw or get 2 mana off of this card, the comparison there is Mana Storm, and that's a really playable 5 mana card. So getting that for 3 mana could be really cool. But one of the downsides there is this card isn't really a 3-drop. Like very rarely are you going to be going like 1-drop, 2-drop, play Mana Lightning, ramp 2. Like that's not really, maybe not going to be like what you're doing with this card as often. Maybe you are, but in a nature deck, like it's kind of hard to do that. And then if you're playing more civs, like maybe if you're playing Magris alongside like Prickleback to turn this on turn 3, or like Blaze Belcher alongside Prickleback to turn this on turn 3, like I don't think this is the direction you're going to be going with that kind of deck, right? So comparing it to something like Mana Storm, like if you're playing it in the mid game where you have 2 creatures or more to ramp off of this card, the downside is like sure it's 3 mana compared to Mana Storm's 5 mana, but if you're playing it on turn 5, it's effectively the same card. Now maybe you have like a 2-drop to pair with it or something like that, but if you're tapping out, or not tapping out, but if you're just playing this as your only spell on turn 5 and ramping 2, it's effectively Mana Storm. But if you ramp 3, it's a lot, but I don't know. This card, it catches my attention a lot more just because being able to ramp a bunch is like a really potent effect. And this card has a lot more use in terms of being able to abuse it than something like Mind Matrix. So this card has my attention a little more. Not sure what the best way to use this card is, because of course like the balance with this is like you want to be playing a creature that can, or a deck that can go wide in the early game, generate a bunch of bodies, and then you also want to be a deck that desires a ton of ramp. So I'm not sure what the home is with this that you would want to do all that. There's not, I don't know if there's any like great ways to put out multiple attackers either, like where you're just doing multiple attacks in one turn and generating a bunch of extra mana either. Like there aren't many combos like that I can really think of. Like there's the old Twilight Commander Alcadius combo, but of course that's just like trying to kill your opponent if you hear, and like I don't know how that would abuse like extra mana, and it's not even infinite attacks or anything like that. Like if you're attacking like an indestructible like Swift Regeneration like Duke Durian or something like that, like you could infinitely, or you can get infinite mana off that, I guess, but outside of that, you're just attacking a few times until you break all your opponent's shields or hit a shield blast with that combo. So I just don't think, I don't know what the home is for this card, but I guess it's worth exploring at the very least. It's a little more of a powerful effect than Mind Matrix would be if you're trying to go this direction. Might of the Titans, yeah, one of your creatures gets plus 9,000 power. Not into this at all. There's been a number of cards so far in the set that just buff power. This card itself, like there's tons of different versions. If any of them are playable, it would be like one of the cheaper ones, like the fire drop, like 2,000, gives powerful attack 2,000, or like I think Monsterify exists in nature that's 2 for plus 4,000. Like I don't know where you're playing 5 mana plus 9,000 power. Mutant Void Ant, Void Spawn, Megabug, 3-drop, 3,000, and when it attacks, you may clash. If you won, one of your creatures gets plus 3,000 power. So it can buff itself, but it's only till the end of the turn. So like if you're forcing your way through a Strider, it's just gonna get killed on the crackback, so not too appealing. Yeah, I just don't really think there's not like a pressing need for a 3-drop Megabug or anything like that. You already have Manatic, and yeah, this card's just not doing anything super powerful. So not really into this card. Spawning Shaman, 6 mana 4k. When it enters the battle zone clash, if you won, you can put a non-evolution creature that's level 4 or less from your hand into the battle zone. So this card is really weird. If you won the clash, this is a card that can go wide, but at 6 mana, that's a little bit expensive, especially for only 4,000 power. One of the problems too with this card is, like, it's not summoning it from your deck like something like Ignis would. Like, this card is coming from your hand, so you have to set it up. On top of that, it's only putting out 4 or less creatures, so like the question is, like, wouldn't you just play those 4 or less creatures leading up to this Spawning Shaman? Like, a lot of the time the 6 drop is the last spell you play, right? You curve, like, maybe you curve like 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, or usually you have to miss a turn off. Like, maybe you go 3, 4, 5, 6, or you go 2, 4, 5, 6, or something like that. And then usually you cap off your curve with something like a Finbar or a Lyra when you're playing that kind of deck. So Spawning Shaman, obviously way underpowered compared to those other 6 drops that I just mentioned. And on top of that, like, usually, again, the 6 drop is the last card in your hand that you cap off the curve with. So if you're holding a 4 drop to pair with it, it's just not powerful, not a big swing. And you're probably having to sacrifice actually playing the 4 drop on turn 4 to do that. So the next card here is Titan Caller. So a 3 mana 2000 power. When it enters the battle zone, look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You can reveal a card from among them that is power 6000 or more and put it into your hand and put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this card is one of the more interesting cards in the set for sure. Being able to dig for powerful cards, especially like 6000 power and more creatures, is pretty nice. Like, just having access to this +1 creature, especially in the early turns. I've talked about how much it works to scale in your favor when you're... The cheaper these cards are that draw extra resources, the better they scale, compared to like a 5 mana 4000 that draws a card versus like a 4 mana 3000 that draws a card. 3 mana 2000 is just a really strong stat line. Beastkin can be a relevant creature type if you want to play this with Bronze Arm Sabertooth, because it can find the Sabertooth and be bait. So the problem with this card is that only seeing 3 cards means it's like a lot more likely to whiff than something like even a Mana Tick would. Also a lot more likely to whiff on the extra resource than something like even Sunclan Tortoise. Like, if you're looking for a 3-drop bait creature that can generate an extra resource, Sunclan Tortoise being pretty close to guaranteed. I mean, it's not guaranteed by any means, right? You could have 2 in your shields. You could have 1 in your shields and then draw the other copy. There's things that can go wrong with Sunclan Tortoise for sure, but you're much more likely to hit on that than you are with Titan Caller. I think like, if you construct your deck in such a way, like maybe Titan Caller is like 65 to 70% to hit a card off of it, which is good, but that's a fair amount of the time where you're whiffing, and you really need to be making use of this card as a bait creature in those instances. So, I mean, there's a lot going for this card. I think one of the key places I really liked it was when you're looking for specific 6000 or more creatures. So when I built my like kind of sort of memey General Marnik combo deck that was really trying to abuse Marnik to dump out giant creatures, it was of the utmost importance that I both had a bait creature and a way to dig for Marnik, and this card could do both, which was really, really potent for that deck. So that's kind of the key place you would want to use this. My problem is, like, if you think about putting this card in Mono Nature mid-range, which is like maybe one of the key homes for this, because it's got a ton of, like, it's got 12 6000 power more creatures. It's probably at its peak in terms of like how likely you are to hit things off of it because of that. So in that deck, I still don't think I would put this card in, because like I said, like, I think I would just prefer playing Sunclan Tortoise, which is maybe weird to say, but it's just like the almost, again, more guaranteed draw is just much more appealing. Just being able to find your land drop for the next turn while playing your bait, so you can play Charging Great Claw the next turn. Sunclan Tortoise just lets you hold on to your evolutions. It lets you just generate, and then it lets you just generate the land drops, right? Titan Caller finds you the evolutions, but you have so many in the Mono Nature deck already. Like, you have 12. You're going to open with 1 or 2, and you're going to hold on to 1 or 2 of those evos, and then you're going to, all you need is bait, and then all you're really using the extra lands or the extra cards for are lands, so you can actually play the evolutions you're holding on to. Like Titan Caller is digging for specific cards, but you don't want to like dig for a specific card just so you can find the land drop, right? Like I don't know. I think it works better to go the other direction, where you just find extra resources to play extra land drops so that you can curve out with the cards that are in your hand. Like I think Titan Caller is a lot less effective for that than something like Sun Clan Tortoise. Um, on top of that, like the Mono Nature, like the 3-drop slot is so contentious too. Like Tricky Turnip's super important for certain matchups and just guarantees that you can have bait lying around so you can evolve to Anjac. Hexproof Attacker is super crucial for closing out games. Nurture, or what is it called? Nurturing High or Jarbala Hatchery. Jarbala Hatchery is like one of the most important cards in the Mono Nature deck. Period. Like if you can untap with this card, your plays are absurd. It effectively draws you like 2 extra mana every turn. Like it's like a +2 every single turn. If you're talking about just like mana resource, like if that card stays in play, you effectively have like 2 more mana every turn, which is just disgusting, right? It just draws 2 cards off of 1 card if you think about it like that. So if they don't have an answer, Jarbala Hatchery just runs away with the game. That card's absurd. So like I just don't think Titan Caller makes it into the deck. Again, the key distinction is like this card is more effective when you're digging for very specific 6,000 power or more creatures. But if you're just looking for a card that +1s, I don't think it's like the best option for that compared to like maybe Manatech if you're going the Mega Bug route, which is pretty clear, where that card is just going to be like more guaranteed to draw a card, and then that kind of prompts you to build more in the direction of Mega Bugs, and then if you want the guarantee +1, like Sun Clan Tortoise is so much more effective for that. So I don't think Titan Caller really gets the spot for me in Mono Nature midrange. Unfortunately, I just think it's worse than the other cards out there. Yeah, I mean it would probably make it if one of those is gone. Like if Tricky Turnip were to get banned or something like that because Hexproof is super annoying. Like Titan Caller would probably be the next man up on that roster. I think it's probably better than Muktak just because I want that like guaranteed +1 in the early game. Muktak's a really nice hit off of Rollcore, but outside of that, like I think Titan Caller is much better in the developing turns, so I would probably have this guy as like the next best option, but I don't think it cracks like the top 3 nature 3-drops for Mono Nature midrange. But that said, there will be like good versions of decks that could easily play this card. Again, just focused around like more specific. It's like if you're built around a certain card, then Titan Caller finds that. But Mono Nature isn't really built around any specific evolution. It just wants to assemble bait and plus evolution and then hit its land drops to make its plays and generate extra resources. And Titan Caller is just not the most effective option for that. So, long-winded explanation there, but definitely a strong card. I'm not sure what the perfect home for it would be, but yeah, still a good card. Totally playable option. Tuber Tribe, 5 mana 4K protector. If it's banished, put it in your mana zone instead. Wild Veggie being like one of the key things going on here, but I don't think this really makes it into any of the Veggie decks. If it was a cheaper one, like if it was another 2-drop Veggie or a 3-drop Veggie, it would be worth considering. But as a 5-drop, much more expensive. You're not really needing to bring this card out off of Field Marshal Cornucopia, although it can be kind of cool because it can, maybe that's not untrue, maybe it would be nice to play like one. I could see playing one copy because there might be situations where like you're sitting behind a Duke Durian and then you can really effectively stabilize against Rush if you can land, like if you have a Durian in play against Rush, you untap with a Durian, you play a Cornucopia, you attack with the Cornucopia, you attack with a Durian, summon out Tuber Tribe. If you have like a tap Durian at 3,000 power and then a Tuber Tribe protecting it at 6,000 power, that can be a pretty tough board state to break through with like a Rush deck, for example. So that could be a way to like maybe you trade off with one of your Bronze Arm Renegades, or you trade off with one of your Pesky Pineapples in the early turns, so you get that extra mana to land that Cornucopia on like turn 5, and that could be a way to stabilize from that point, because if you're trading off creatures, they're trying to push through with fast attacks, it's really tough to break through both Tuber Tribe plus a tap Durian. So that sequence could be worth doing. One of the key ways, like Vile Veggies will beat Rush is by setting up like Cornucopia plus Ninja Pumpkin, and I think Ninja Pumpkin is much better than this card. It plays so much better with the deck as a whole. It's just a better card in general, I think. It plays really well with Swift Regeneration. 7,000 power is like super big off of Cornucopia. But Tuber Tribe for that play pattern alone might be a consideration, but I don't know if it really gets there at the end of the day. But that would sort of be the appeal to the card for me, is just being able to threaten that play pattern against a Rush deck. Pretty appealing. So the final nature card we have here is Warlord Titan. So 8 mana, 6,000 power double breaker. If you have 3 or more creatures in the battle zone, you can tap 4 fewer mana cards to summon this creature. So this one might be one of the tougher ones to enable, at least on curve, just because you have to have exactly like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop. So you would need to be playing either like a 2-color aggro deck where you're playing Prickleback plus like other 1-drops from other civilizations. At which point, like this kind of card, if you're playing a 2-color deck, like there's probably so many more options than like playing Warlord Titan. Like again, you'd probably just pick, like if you're playing Fire, you're probably going to play Restless Conflagration or something like that, or maybe you just play Bronze Arm Sabertooth. If you're playing like a more nature heavy and looking for like a big 4-drop fast attacking like double breaker, like they're just quicker cards in general. So if you're playing like a nature only deck, I just don't think this card really slots in either. Like Mono Nature, despite being a mono civ deck, like there's just so many powerful options, and this card just doesn't really compete with that like Evo mid-range game plan that's going on. Charging Great Call is just like so important for the deck as a whole. Putting on the pressure in the early turns, developing its mana, making use of like the bait creatures. Like this card, the reason I talk about Mono Nature is because like you can play, like my build already plays 6 1-drops. It has 3 Prickleback and 3 Horn Chameleon. So you could, if you want to, you can make that play pattern of just curve out. Like the deck can go wide if it wants to pretty well, right? Like you could even do something kind of like if you go 1-drop, or not even 1-drop, you could just go like 2-drop into Jarbala Hatchery, and then turn 4, with those 2 creatures in play, you could go like, you don't even have to hit a land drop. You could just go 1-drop plus Warlord Titan on turn 4 without even hitting a land drop, or you can play 2-drop plus Warlord Titan on turn 4. So there's a lot more options where Jarbala Hatcheries is considered. You can even miss land drop, play Chief Many Tribes, get an extra mana off Chief Many Tribes, and play Warlord Titan without like hitting your natural land drop for the turn. So you can go pretty wide pretty quickly with the Mono Nature mid-range deck, which could maybe support this card. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's really making the cut. It's not cracking into the deck list for me. Partly because like the main playstyle I take when I'm playing the Mono Nature mid-range deck is like not really to go too wide that often, or at least not in the majority of matchups. A lot of the time I'm playing it slow. I'm holding on to my creatures. I'm trying to set up like creature plus evolution creature in 1 turn. I'm playing towards that side of things more than I am just like curving out 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop. Like the line of that kind of line, like curving out like that, is not really a line of play I take very often. Like I'm rarely like I don't really want to give myself a reason to cast Horn Chameleon on turn 1, because that's not really a play I want to make. Like I want to hold my Horn Chameleons to make use of them in combination with Jarbala Hatchery to net extra mana. I want to be using them to do that, to like put out evolution creatures out of nowhere. Like that's what I kind of want to be using Horn Chameleon for, not putting onto the battle zone just so I can try to ramp out a Warlord Titan. So I don't think it really plays, despite the deck being able to facilitate this card, I don't really think it plays with the archetype how I want to be playing with that deck. So the benefits of it, I just don't think are really there either. Like, again, like the idea of it being a card that dodges Bone Blades is kind of cool, but when you're playing nature, like it's not worth the like trying to transfer from like charging Great Claw to be better against Bone Blades. Like your deck is already pretty good against Bone Blades because you have turnips and you have a bunch of creatures that generate value like Jarbala Hatchery if they weren't already able to answer that with Bone Blades or Chief Many Tribes or Sun Clan Tortoise, and then all your evolutions. Like you have tons of evolutions already. It's not like Monolite where most of its evolutions and creatures are die to Bone Blades. Like you have Anjac and Rollcore, which are just immune to that cards anyways. So this card doesn't really get there in any decks for me, unfortunately. But yeah. So that is nature. So a few interesting cards like Tuber Tribe, kind of interesting. Maybe a 1 or 2 of in Wild Veggies, but probably doesn't get there because the deck is pretty tight as is. Titan Caller is a great card. Not sure if it really finds like a home immediately. It's more of, I think, again, you're not really just like slotting this in as a +1 card. I feel like this is more like an enabler for like specific interactions. When you're compared to a lot of the other options. A lot of the other cards here not too good. Mana Lightning is worth exploring with. Guacamole Gunner I think is probably like the best outright card, just powerful Shield Blast creature. Flutterbug, definitely a nice option. Could easily see play in Mono Nature as like a 2-drop slot over like maybe some of the other options, because it answers like it answers some issues like with blockers that other cards can't, where you can like get through for attacks with your evolution creatures to break shields, put on pressure. It's a nice card to do that, because other than that, like you don't really have any ways to interact with your opponent's creatures outside of Boulder Fist. So could be a novel addition to Mono Nature. On top of that, it's just like another great Mega Bug option alongside Mana Pod Beetle and Pouncing Cricket. Headstrong Wanderer is kind of decent as well. I don't know. It feels like Flutterbug, Guacamole Gunner, and Titan Caller are probably the 3 standout cards for me. There was also Airward and Prickleback, which I X'd out earlier, but that card I don't think is really great anyway. So yeah, I think Guacamole Gunner is my favorite of these cards. Titan Caller, maybe. Titan Caller might get second. It's like a really intriguing card, and definitely a powerful card for sure. So that would be the nature review. A bit more long-winded, I think, on this one. I went a little more in depth on some of the cards, but hopefully you enjoyed the analysis. Let me know what your thoughts are on some of these cards, what you think of them. Maybe some things I didn't consider, or cards you thought were better than I mentioned or worse than I mentioned. Would be great to hear. So as always, thank you for watching the video, and we will see you in the multi-civ review portion of this series. Bye.